been a while since the last time we looked at a great Universal Monster movie, right? I believe the last one we looked at that was actually great was Son of Frankenstein, which was a while ago. Well, what do you say we fix that with probably what's going to be the longest review out of this entire marathon, excluding the Dracula double feature? Because this movie is significant for a grand majority of reasons. It is the sequel to The Wolfman. It is technically the next installment in the Frankenstein series. It's the first crossover in film history. And it's the blueprint for every cinematic universe in the known history. So, yeah, needless to say, there's a lot to talk about with this one. Not to mention, even has a very long, lengthy production on top of that. So we're going to talk about the production, we're going to talk about the plot, we're going to talk about everything that has come from this movie and from its existence, which is quite a bit, but we'll get there when we get there. But until then, strap in, get some popcorn, grab a drink, preferably something that's healthy or unhealthy, I don't know, depending on your preference. And let's dive into the giant conglomerate that is Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Right here on Animation Station, right here on 31 Days of Horror, Monster-Mania. Let's start with the production, and it's a pretty lengthy one, so again, strap yourselves in for a very long review. During lunch at the Universal Commissary, screenwriter Siodmak had joked to producer George Wagner that he had a great title for a new film in the series. Half-heartedly, he needed a down payment for his car. Frankenstein Wolf's the Meat Man. Wagner, not knowing for a casual sense of humor, left to have his lunch. Shortly thereafter, he called Siodmak to his office, telling him to change the title to Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and to go ahead and buy that car. Dumbfounded but pleased, the writer went to work. Thus, that next film was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which served as both a sequel to Ghost, which I call bullcrap on for numerous reasons that I will do my best to explain in this review. Yeah, this is not a sequel to Ghost, no matter how much it tries. And The Wolfman, which it definitely is a sequel to. It's a great sequel to The Wolfman, but it is not a sequel to Ghost at any way, any shape, any form at all. Immediately following his success as Dracula, Dracula had been the first choice to play the monster in the Universal original Frankenstein film. But Lugosi famously turned down the non-speaking, heavily made-up role, as conceived by the original director Robert Florey. The monster was nothing more than a mindless killing machine, and not suitable for Lugosi's rise in stardom as a leading actor. But again, that's up to interpretation, because, well, the real Lugosi's 6 feet underground, resting in peace in his Dracula cave, so you can't exactly ask him. Sorry, I got dark. But you know what? No, I'm not sorry that this got dark, because this is supposed to be dark. It's a monster review. Screw it. Where was I? Sorry, I lost my spot. After the changes of director from James Whale, along with a major script and conceptual revision, the virtually unknown Boris Karloff was then cast in the star-making role. Florey later wrote that the Hungarian actor didn't show himself very enthusiastic for the role and didn't want to play it. 8 years later, Lugosi joined the franchise as the monster's twisted companion Igor in Son of Frankenstein. Which he's great as, by the way. That's one of his best roles ever. He returned to the role in the sequel Ghost of Frankenstein, in which Igor's brain is implanted into the monster, who's now played by Lon Chaney Jr. You know, again, as the nerd put it, it's like playing a rock, causing the creature to take Lugosi/Igor's voice. After plans for Chaney to play both the monster and the Wolfman in the next film fell through for logistical reasons, that's way too much makeup for one man, the natural next step was for Lugosi, who had turned 60 during the film's production, to take on the part that he was once slated to originate. So yeah, 8 years after he initially turned it down for whatever reason, now he finally gets to play as the monster. The original script, and indeed the movie as originally filmed, had the monster performing dialogue throughout the film, including references to the events of Ghosts and indicating that the monster is not blind, a side effect of the transplant as revealed at the end of the previous film, and the reason for his iconic stiff-arm Frankenstein walk that has become the iconic way the character moves now. According to screenwriter Siad Mack, a studio screening audience reacted negatively to this, finding the idea of the monster speaking with Hungarian accent unintentionally funny. Although the monster spoke with Lugosi's voice at the end of Ghost of Frankenstein, the audience had been carefully prepared for it by the plot of the movie. Though it cannot be confirmed, through any source that this was generally accepted as the reason virtually all scenes in which Lugosi speaks were deleted. Though 2 brief scenes remain in the film that show Lugosi's mouth moving without sound. Consequently, Lugosi is on screen literally for only a few minutes, leaving the Wolfman as the film's primary focus. Which is why I said in the beginning of this review that it's a great sequel to The Wolfman, and not at all a sequel to Ghost, because anything that they actually had that was connecting to Ghost, they cut out because the audience found it funny. But again, we can't 100% confirm that, that's just popular speculation. Lugosi suffered exhaustion at some point during the filming, and his absence from the set, combined with his physical limitations at age 60, for obvious reasons, required the liberal use of stand-ins. Stuntman Gil Perkins allegedly portrayed the monster in the character's first scene, 35 minutes into the film, and during much of the monster's fight, conclusive documentation needed. Although a still existing of Lugosi in the ice, when viewers see the monster for the first time, including close-ups, it is actually a stunt double, stuntman Eddie Parker, who is usually credited as Lugosi's sole double, but his primary stunt role was thought to be that of the Wolfman. However, he does appear as the monster in at least one shot, and yet a possible third stuntman also stands in for Lugosi in 2 brief sequences. The edited results unfairly suggest that Lugosi had to be doubled even in non-strenuous scenes, and the multiple use of alternating stuntmen in both close-ups and medium shots damages the continuity of Lugosi's characterization. As an example, the doubles in the fight scene stiffen their arms even though that was a cautious habit of the previously blind monster. For instance, a medium shot shows Lugosi pulling down a cabinet with his arms naturally bent at the elbows, but the next shot is of a double completing the task with fully straightened arms, like this. This would be the final Universal horror film in which the monster played a major role. In the subsequent films, House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, which we'll both talk about because they are part of the Pantheon, now played by Glenn Strange, comes to life only in the final scenes. And then in the 1948 Universal comedy, another movie we'll also cover, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, the second and only other film in which Lugosi plays Dracula, outside of Return of the Vampire from an extra other company, Strange has a larger role, and the creature once again speaks, albeit very limited dialogue, twice muttering, "Yes, master." And that is literally all the background info of this movie. But it's still pretty funny that this entire idea that literally became a blueprint for a very popular idea that ended up becoming a staple of cinema today was all started because of a half-hearted joke. So, with that said, now we can get straight into... Oh wait, there's some more. There's tribute and reception, I'm sorry. Reviews on the film's original release were mixed, with many critics criticizing Lugosi's performance of Frankenstein's creature, not knowing that the character was blind and that there had been dialogue scenes that were removed by the studio. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman currently holds a 30% maximum rating approval on Rotten Tomatoes. I can tell you right now, I've seen a lot worse shit than this. Like, to have it that low while other worse movies are that high? Yeah, that's insulting. A tribute to this meeting of 2 horror film legends happens near the beginning film of the one and only Alien vs. Predator. No, I'm not counting Requiem. It's a piece of shit that doesn't deserve to exist. When this film is seen playing on a television at the satellite receiving station. Also, in the 1999 Universal release October Sky, 2 young men are talking about which movies are the best to take a girl to in hopes of getting some romantic action. One of them suggests Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman as a typical film for such a challenge. And then, in the 1962 very well-known crossover King Kong vs. Godzilla, the music from the fight scene at the end of the film also plays during the final fight between Godzilla and Kong. Sorry about the little cut there. My phone decided to be weird and start doing its weird storage crap. Anyway, I also forgot to notice one other thing about this, the movie structure. So let's go over that real quick. As ultimately edited and released, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is told in two almost equal parts. The opening scenes tell the story of Talbot's resurrection, killing spree, hospitalization, and escape across Europe. Much time is spent with a secondary policeman, Inspector Owen, and on scenes with a desperate Talbot hospitalized by Dr. Mannering. The discovery of the monster and pursuit of Dr. Frankenstein's scientific notes do not begin until 35 minutes into the movie. The second half introduces the monster, Elsa, and the village of Visaria and its inhabitants. So, yeah, it's like two movies smashed together, but you have to remember it's the first of its kind, because it's literally the blueprint of every crossover and cinematic universe that we've gotten since. Like, just to name a couple examples for you, without this, we wouldn't have gotten Freddy vs. Jason. Without this, we wouldn't have gotten Alien vs. Predator. Which, even if you don't like the movie, I mean, without this movie, this wouldn't even have been a conceptualized thing. Without this movie, we wouldn't have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Heck, weirdest example, but also the most relevant example. Without this movie, we wouldn't have the cinematic universe of Sonic the Hedgehog. So, without this movie, none of these cinematic universes would have probably ever existed. Sure, Marvel's the one that got it the most popularity, but it was Universal that originated the idea and made the blueprint that Marvel, DC, and many others copied off of. So, yeah, just interesting little trivia when you really break it all down. That without this movie, like, none of these would exist. Whether you love them or you hate them, they exist because this movie was made. That's how significant it is. Not just to Universal, but to film in general, because afterwards, people started figuring out how to use their copyrights correctly. Granted, it took several decades and until the 2000s until they started actually doing it, unless you were in Japan with King Kong vs. Godzilla, but still, they got around to it, they started connecting things, and now the cinematic universe has become a commonplace that's done both good and bad in modern cinema. All because of this one little Monster Mash movie that started it all. Okay, I think I've said enough about this movie's production, structure, and trivia. I think now it's time we finish this off by talking about the plot. And just gonna say right up front, the plot's a bit of a mess. It is definitely a B-movie in the most B-movie of ways, where you shouldn't care about the plot because everything else around it is great. Which I know I usually give some movies a lot of crap for nowadays, most notably in Weapons, but the weird thing is that you have to judge it for the standards of back then. Like, for the standards of now having no story, yeah, that's a huge problem. But if it's a B movie that knows what it is, you can forgive the story being lackluster as long as the rest of the movie is entertaining. That's what I'm saying with most of these Universal Monster reviews. You have to review them and look at them as how they were made in their time period. Because technically, none of them should hold up today. Aside from maybe King Kong 1933, and even then, that's not a Universal Monster movie. So, but still, that movie holds up amazingly. So, judge it by the standards of back then, and that you're watching something from back then, rather than trying to hold it up to the standards of today. That's all I'm saying, because it's night and day between what they had back then than what we have now. Okay, I've bullshit enough. Let's talk about this movie's plot. 4 years after the events of The Wolfman, a duo of grave robbers break into the Talbot family crypt to rob the grave of Larry Talbot, the Wolfman, once again played by Lon Chaney Jr. A valuable is buried with him on the night of a full moon. Yeah, that was real smart. During the grave robbery, the grave robbers remove the wolfsbane buried with him, and he is awakened from death by the full moon shining down his uncovered body. And he kills one of them. Yeah, that's all it takes to wake the Wolfman up from death, is just one little bit of shine from the full moon. And I don't think any other werewolf movie actually does this ever again. Seeking a cure for the curse that causes him to transform into a werewolf with every full moon, Talbot leaves Britain and goes to the remains of Frankenstein's castle, as he hopes to find there the notes of Dr. Ludwig Frankenstein, so he might learn how to permanently end his own life through scientific means. And as literally the only, hints or little minuscule bit of continuity between this and Ghost. Outside of that, this has nothing to do with Ghost of Frankenstein. It might as well be its own separate thing. You want to know the biggest example? By chance, during his transformations into a werewolf, he falls into the castle's frozen catacombs, where, after wandering around, he discovers Frankenstein's monster has been frozen in ice. Which, if you've seen Ghost of Frankenstein, is not how that monster was destroyed in that particular movie. And the movie takes literally no time to even try to explain it. So you're just sitting there baffled, like, why in the flying fuck is the Frankenstein monster that I just saw burned to death in a house fire in the previous movie engulfed, encased in fucking ice? I don't really know how else to put it, but it really is just two movies smashed together, and they do a terrible job explaining over half of it. But again, in the standards of back then, this movie's more about the fun factor rather than the storytelling. Yes, I know that may sound like an oxymoron considering the incredible movies that came out before it, but you have to remember, this entire movie was literally made based off of a joke from a writer. So you get what you get. And of course, as stated earlier, Frankenstein's monster is now played by Bela Lugosi. Finding that the monster is unable to locate the notes of the long-dead doctor, Talbot seeks out Baroness Elsa Frankenstein, played by Ilona Massey, hoping she knows their hiding place. And once again, nothing's explained, because this other Frankenstein is not explained if it's a descendant of Ludwig, if it's someone related to another Frankenstein that hasn't been shown on screen. It's a clusterfuck, plain and simple. So don't even try to figure out who Elsa's related to in terms of her Frankenstein lineage, or else it's going to give you a fucking headache. A performance of the life-affirming folk song Farola Farole enrages Talbot into a fit before the Frankenstein monster crashes the village festival. And they do play that whole song. It's not a bad song, but it really does feel out of place in this movie. With the monster revealed, Elsa gives the notes to Talbot and Dr. Mannering, played by Patrick Knowles, who has tracked Talbot from Great Britain across Europe, so that they may be used in an effort to drain all life from both Talbot and the monster. Ultimately, however, Dr. Mannering is come over by the same desire and drive for science that drove the other Frankensteins crazy, because he has a desire now to see the monster at full strength, overwhelming his actual logic. And to Elsa's horror, he decides to fully revive it. Very dumbass move on his part. As an unfortunate coincidence, the experiment takes place on the night of a full moon, and Talbot is transformed just as the monster regains his strength. After the monster lustfully carries off Elsa, the Wolfman attacks him, and the two of them fight as she runs out of the castle with Mannering. The Wolfman and the monster then engage in a pretty entertaining fight that gives you what you want, until they both get swept away in a flood that results after the local tavern owner blows up the town dam to drown the castle's inhabitants. Yeah, apparently the whole town now is just fucking crazy. So, yeah, that's the plot of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. It is a confusing, cluttered mess that is barely explained for anything, but I will say it does a good job adhering to the actual continuity of the Wolfman. It does a terrible job at all connecting to Ghost of Frankenstein, but in terms of it being a Wolfman sequel, it is really good. And they even got the fortune teller character from the first movie to come back for this movie, so that's pretty cool. Alright, I've discussed pretty much everything I can with this movie at this point. I went over the plot, the structure, the production, the reception, the tribute, the trivia, etc., etc., etc. This is already a very long review, so why don't we just end it off with one very long final thoughts. And I do mean long. I have a good bit to say about this movie still. So, here's my final overall verdict. Hope you enjoyed. Sure, nowadays crossovers and cinematic universes are nothing new, but this one is literally the reason why those became the thing in the first place. Sorry. Late at night, please excuse me, I can't talk for shit. Universal was actually the first to come up with the shared universe concept, which was not only revolutionary for its time, but it also led to some of the most entertaining monster movies of all time, including King Kong vs. Godzilla and, as already noted, Freddy vs. Jason. Not to mention that this is the movie where, after turning down the role a decade prior, Bela Lugosi got to play as the monster. As well as this also acting as a direct sequel to The Wolfman, the stars were aligning to make this a memorable spectacle. And while it wasn't really put together all that well, it still was memorable, and it's still significant, and to the point where, despite my problems with this movie, I'm still going to call it great on pure entertainment value, not to mention its place in film history. And I'll just say right up front that the film itself is a lot of fun to watch. The monsters battling is great, the effects are excellent as we finally get a werewolf transformation scene. Like, we didn't get that or a shot of the full moon in the original Wolfman, so here we finally get that, and then it becomes a staple of every other werewolf movie to follow. The human characters are solid. They're not great, but they're not terrible. Again, unless you try to connect it all to previous characters, then it's just going to give you a migraine. Acting is over the top in all the best ways. Lon Chaney Jr. is still great as the Wolfman. Bela Lugosi is pretty good as Frankenstein's monster. He's at least better than Chaney was. And the side characters, as weird and very numerous as they are, they're fine. None of them are outright terrible. It's still a very brisk runtime. Lon Chaney Jr. is still fantastic as Larry Talbot. Rewatchability is high. The atmosphere is incredible. This movie has so much good atmosphere in certain scenes, especially the opening with the grave robbers. It's a nice foggy cemetery, very reminiscent of how this all started with the original Frankenstein. It's nostalgic. It's really cool. The tone is very B-movie without being cringe. And the finale is awesome. It's confusing, but it's awesome. However, as a Frankenstein movie though, that's unfortunately where it dropped the ball. Lugosi's performance as the monster is good, but he's given nothing to work with, because the monster is unable to do anything but grunt and make his normal noises and have his arms outstretched, because the producers and apparently test audience did not like Lugosi's voice. Despite the fact that he was fucking Dracula and Igor. It's not like they didn't already know that Lugosi was affiliated with monster movies or affiliated with his voice. I don't know, it's just a whole lot of dumb bullshit. The writing feels uninspired and haphazard, and worst of all, the story itself is just an absolute mess, as it has zero connection to Ghost, no matter how much it tries to say otherwise. Introduced yet another Frankenstein without making clear who she's even related to, and worst of all, explains absolutely nothing in regards to how the monster ended up where he was, encased in ice, for no reason, or any acknowledgement whatsoever of the events of Ghost, or any of the other previous movies whatsoever, leading to confusion and migraines out the ass, trying to decipher any coherence out of it at all. It's just, for lack of a better term, as I already said way in the beginning of this review, an absolute clusterfuck. That being said, though, I still really like this movie overall, as a fun monster movie and as the blueprint of the cinematic universe that Marvel, DC, Scooby-Doo, Freddy, Jason, Alien, Predator, and even Sonic the Hedgehog would follow in later decades. However, I fully acknowledge that this movie's enjoyment is more as a B movie due to its weak writing and messy storytelling that lacks coherency or continuity. Again, outside of being a good sequel to The Wolfman. It's a great Wolfman sequel, as that side of the story is actually done pretty well. And again, they brought back the fortune teller character from the first movie, and she actually does serve a role despite her brief cameo. But as a Frankenstein movie, it is a mess. As stated before, though, this film is still a lot of fun, and if you don't care about the finer details, you'll have a great time. Or, as Sean Chandler would put it, it's a turn your brain off popcorn flick, or one of his more notable phrases, it's a Taco Bell movie. And from that perspective, it's great, giving the Pantheon its first genuine Silver Age classic, after having so many other movies after Son of Frankenstein being very, very mediocre. And some, like the Invisible Man sequels, just being outright terrible. So, yeah, this movie's definitely flawed, and it's definitely gonna work better for certain audiences over others. Like, if you're looking for a sophisticated story, much like the first three films, you're gonna be colossally disappointed because of how messy the story is. However, if you're going into it as a Wolfman fan that wants to see the continuation of Larry Talbot's story, and also how he and Frankenstein end up colliding, that's when this movie gets really fun, and it gives you what you want if you're looking for that. So, look at it as a B movie, and you're gonna have a great time. Me personally, I always have a great time with this movie, as long as I turn my brain off and ignore the finer details. If I do that, it's a really fun time. However, because it is still technically a mess, I can't give it a super high score. What I can do, though, is give it a high final verdict on pure entertainment value of an 8 out of 10. It's a great movie as long as you know what you're getting going into it. If you try to set yourself up with too high of an expectation, you're going to end up disappointed. It's a fun, goofy, turn your brain off B movie that ended up serving as a blueprint for many other crossovers, both good and bad, to follow in later years. That's the way I look at it. It's a great movie as long as you know what you're expecting. Well, that's it. That concludes probably my longest review in this series so far, because I think outside of maybe the Dracula double feature, these haven't been super long. But yeah, it's a Silver Age movie that actually did have some production info about it. So we were able to really go full deep dive on this one. Not to mention, I had a lot of ending thoughts there. So yeah, longest review we've had for a while with the Universal Monsters, and I'm happy with it. I'm content with this review because, again, it's a movie that kind of knows what it is and kind of doesn't know what it is. It's a mixed bag. If you're looking for just a fun B movie with two classic monsters, you get what you want. But if you're going into it for a sophisticated story that's much like the original Frankenstein trilogy or the classic original Wolfman, you're going to be disappointed. It's pretty much pick your poison. Okay, and now with this particular final segment going on for almost 20 minutes, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it here. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more videos like this almost every single day. Feel free to hit the hype button if you so desire to get this higher up in the algorithm. And leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below on the movie we discussed today, or just your opinions on the Universal Monster saga in general. Always happy to hear the thoughts of fellow monster fans. Well, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time for a very, very weird one. I know I've called a lot of these weird, but, oh boy, this next one's a special kind of weird, because it's not even a horror movie. It's a tragedy musical that's also a remake of a 1925 movie that I haven't reviewed yet. And it's the only Universal Monster movie that's in color. Yeah, that means we're not going to be in the black and white aesthetic for the next review. But it still gives us a good bit to talk about, and it's by no means a bad movie, so I'll discuss it with you at length next time when we discuss the 1943 remake of The Phantom of the Opera.